So a couple of things. What is the optimization opportunity? What was it or what is it in commercial aviation and sort of the planning period in commercial aviation? And then what are you briefly touched on it, but what are the opportunities in business
Yeah,
aviation and how is the planning period or the planning process
sure.
different?
So within the commercial aviation space, there's a very long history of planning rules. Some of them were sort of a negotiated compromise between the regulation entities like the FAA and the feasibility of the planning itself. So the fact that North American companies truncate every calendar month how their schedule are being done was due to the fact that it was just like not humanly possible to plan for longer periods than that.
Right.
And so there's a very weird legacy um, state of the, let's say, previous FAR rules that were bound to the human capability of solving the problem. And now this has been progressively removed for FRMS reasons. And which is completely unlike what's being done in Part 135, for example, where this is like if we don't want to be bound to what scheduled aviation has to do, what's the acceptable compromise for on-demand or chartered or commute style of operations? Yeah, so those historical legacy rules um, gave rise to what we call bid line, where we would create an anonymized line for pilots and they would bid on those. And then at some point, there were a lot of abuse with this system. And so, where the golden era of optimization in commercial aviation was when they went from bid line to preferential bidding system that was mostly warranted by courts or by union groups, where they wanted to have better quality of life for the pilots and so on and so forth. But since the operation is so standard or quasi-standard, there's not a lot of there's much lower variation across commercial aviation companies than there is across, say, business aviation companies. And so even though tailoring a solution for one aviation company is much longer than it is today, it was still short enough and close enough to the next guy that they could roll out a solution to most of them. But now, with a more flexible technology, then we can open that within other business mode, other aviation mode, and so given the actual nature of the scheduling rules within the two different rule sets, the potential for optimization is different. The other thing is the business objectives of commercial aviation is slightly different than those from business aviation, where within business aviation, quality of service is much more important than profitability. So all the optimization systems within scheduled aviation is geared toward raw profitability as opposed to business aviation, where it's more like a user experience and convenience and so on and so forth. And so you're not optimizing for the same resources within the same context. So when we go back to the idea of optimal resource allocation, then you're not maximizing or minimizing the same function within these two contexts.
Right. So commercial aviation historically, I mean, the opportunity has typically been they plan their schedule for the next 6 months or the next quarter, and then it's kind of done. And then you also have the optimization on the crew scheduling side of things. But as you say, it's all profitability geared, whereas business aviation charter tends to be much more mixed objectives, which I think often gets portrayed as something that's not possible with software. So taking into account other measures than profitability, but the reality is not the case. It's just a
Yep,
different optimization function. But also the technology needs to be more flexible because it's
exactly.
a different problem.
And they're more different. They're more different from one another than they could be within commercial aviation.
Right. Commercial operations tend to be more uniform versus those in
Exactly.
business aviation, which all sort of has separate.
Exactly. And now
Yeah.
what has changed is that It used to be really hard and complex to adapt to the slightly different variations on a somewhat standard commercial aviation space. But now we can do things that are much more different than before due to new technology available.
Right. So the new technology allows you not only to adapt to different commercial operations much easier, but even go as far as making it easy to adapt between business aviation
I would say
operations.
like it's as easy to adapt as was before. It's just like so much faster now that it's like economically feasible now to apply that to more areas, more industries than before.
Right. Okay.